Hi, my name is Cam. I'm a cinematographer and editor with StoryKeep. I work closely with the director to craft a film from start to finish that feels authentic and powerful, all the way from filming interviews to diving deep into an edit to elevate these stories. In my own life, it's always been super important for me to document and archive memories. I've always taken film photos throughout my whole life of my family, my brothers, my mom and my dad, and now my new twins. And I think having those memories preserved for a lifetime is something that's super important to me. And I think in the same vein, it's on a whole nother level with a legacy film where you're hearing stories from the older generations, especially about the values that have shaped the family and stories that are important to them. And think bringing those all together to create a cohesive film is something that just grows more powerful as time goes on, having that for preservation's sake, but also for the sake of future generations becoming inspired by these stories of hard work and determination that brought the family to where it is today. I'm thinking in my own life, of my own grandfather, who I never had a chance to meet. I can't imagine how special it would be for me to hear him tell some stories I might never have heard, or even just to hear his voice would be really special. And I think that's kind of the value that StoryKeep can bring. And so if that sounds interesting to you or your family or a family you support, please don't hesitate in reaching out.
Welcome to Who We Remember. I'm Jamie Younger, the founder of StoryKeep and your host for this podcast. First, let me say how delighted I am to have you joining us for the show. This is a place where we have uncommon conversations about things that matter deeply to most of us, the people we love, and the purpose we give to our own lives and legacies. Our mission at StoryKeep is to capitalize on the power of story for profound good in families of wealth. Since 2010, we've partnered with over 100 families worldwide, creating personal films and private podcasts that help a family navigate their shared narrative. Our work is designed to deepen connections. My conversations on this podcast center around two questions. First, I ask my guests whose life story from their own family would they most want to see documented on film? And the second, what are they as a person and as a professional hoping to create and leave behind? Today, I'm joined by Kate Bright, a former family office executive and the founder and CEO of UMBRA International. Kate is a chartered security professional and the pioneering force behind the secure lifestyle concept, a holistic, human-centered approach to helping private clients and families feel safe in a complex world. She's proudly British and Irish with Danish and Bavarian roots and brings an incredible energy to everything she does, whether it's mentoring next-gen leaders or blazing down a sports pitch, as she did as a kid, with a fiery pace that earned her the nickname The Furnace. Kate is here to talk about her grandmother, or as she calls her, Granny, Olive Duncan. She was a sharp, resilient North Londoner born in 1912 who lived through bombings, personal loss, and reinvention. Olive gave birth to Kate's mom during an air raid. She protested against forced retirement, drew seams on the back of her legs with eyeliner when nylons were rationed, and lived with a defiant kind of grace. She wrapped herself in Union Jack during wartime and later, in the face of personal tragedy, held the family together with quiet strength. Watching her do her makeup was actually one of Kate's earliest fascinations. Olive was elegance and grit, a woman whose wisdom and wit would have made for one unforgettable on-camera interview. Today, Kate brings Olive's memory to life with tenderness, humor, and admiration. So settle in, you're about to hear a remarkable story and meet someone who is authentic and deeply focused on what matters. This is Who We Remember. Let's dive in. Kate, I'm so delighted to spend time with you today talking about your grandmother, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you're a grandmother, Olive Duncan, born in North London in 1912, right after World War One, or before World War One. Tell me about why you chose Olive, why you wanted to talk about her on the show.
Well, firstly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about such a family icon. Olive, as my mother's mother, was the only grandparent that I actually met, albeit very briefly in my early life. And I realized I hadn't sort of delved into her life, and having shared a bond with my mother over my grandfather's death and actually going with her to find his death registration, it seemed only fitting when I was thinking about who I wanted to learn more about that I delved in with my mother to sort of put this story right, I guess. And it's funny because you make up some of the stories, and when you see the story in black and white, there's a very existential sort of part of the jigsaw puzzle that starts to piece together. But I chose her also, I think, because as I started to understand more about her story and journey, it really resonated with me that the themes of her life and the themes that she wrestled with, it's like same but different now, albeit we live in a different kind of world now, one which she would be, I think, really fascinated about. But also I think I wanted to immortalize some of her badassness and some of the things that she fought for and some of the things she fought against, and the societal norms that even just by her existence, getting divorced and things like that were totally just out of that time space for a woman to sort of experience. So I guess, many reasons, but I just think that Olive's iconic place in my heart, and certainly some of the pictures that I've now seen of her wrapped in flags and all sorts of things that were at that time probably also totally risque, again appeal to my sense of fun as well. So yeah, I was it's been an absolute delve into my own sort of ancestral genealogical treasure trove that I've really enjoyed. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
I'm so glad. I hear this time and again from people who come on the show that in preparation of talking about their loved one, many people are good students and good researchers, and they, go on all kinds of hunts and bear hunts and, and down into museums and all kinds of things. And I'm so glad that it instigated this great opportunity for you to talk with your mom. What were some of the things that you were delighted to learn about that you maybe had a little of an inkling about your grandmother?
I think I always remember her as being someone who wasn't afraid to embrace her feminine, and that strength, that stoic sort of nature with which she would rise every morning with the hairnet, make herself up with her makeup before breakfast, present herself, that kind of the delight, I guess, that I've had in understanding that despite having to carry a lot of the masculine side of protecting the family and making sure that ends were met in her own family life before she had my mother, that she didn't lose that sense of really delightful, iconic. I keep saying this word iconic because the pictures I now see of her, even on the picket line, are her absolutely pristinely presented and never missing that opportunity to make sure that she put her best foot forward. For me, that's what been one of the biggest delights of this whole process, has been to see that you can actually protest on the picket line, but still be fully, holding a matching glove, hat, scarf, and pillbox, handbag, and polished shoes. And why not? That for me, I guess, has been something that's just been an absolute joy to find out about her. And as well, I think the joy of knowing that she had a really kind of joyful dating life, even, you know, learning about the boyfriends. Again, it's just the things that have really resonated for me, that this was a real person, and this was a person who had a life before she met my grandfather and therefore had my mother. And I think that's kind of cool that you get to know a little bit about the playful side, the side that that then clearly meant a lot to her in terms of raising, you know, 3 daughters, which just gives her, I think, a really rounded personality of someone that I think I would have loved to have hung out with when she was racing around London, like I was when I was sort of, you know, of that age as well. It's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. You bring up such a beautiful part of the work of what we do that I treasure so much, which is that we have these images of older people, because in our own lives, these were older people. This is your grandmother. But in telling their life story and looking at it again, you realize almost for the first time, okay, this person was my age, you know, this person was a baby, this person grew up in this situation, and they were just like me in so many ways, and they become alive in a younger version of themselves in our imaginations that we didn't quite get, you know, like we had to grow up ourselves to realize, wait a second, she was like 21, you know, doing this. It's a beautiful thing.
And I read some of the story that was age appropriate to my 11 and 8-year-old nieces in that kind of like tying the loop way. Yeah. And they were just kind of 8 and 11, 2 girls, you know, the dog was called Kip, you know, their dog's called Leo. This sort of stuff, again, that was for me also one of the most fun parts of this, is in my auntyhood was relaying the story of only their great grandmother. You know, this is not sort of out of the bounds of people these days having that generation alive still. But yeah, and it's born in a century that they were never even touching. So yeah, it's I think you're absolutely right. That sort of immortalizing of that individual, and finding out those little day to day, almost the mundane, so special, and such a kind of cherishable gift that you can then explain to that generation coming after is it's quite powerful.
It's so beautiful. I mean, one of the things that you shared with me was that she went to Blackrock Road School, or Blackstock Road School, I should say, and that she was like a head girl there, meaning I guess she was doing well. She was a leader in her class, but then she ends up not getting into the next school she wants to go to. Tell me what you know of that story and why, and how she was taught.
So again, through this sort of part of her life where just before she lost her own father, and there's a kind of a bit of a grey area of when this will happen, but around about age 16, when her father literally didn't come home, you know, just lost her father from a heart attack, straight sort of, you know, one of those instant things that I guess if I look back and reflect now would have really impacted her, although she never spoke about it, certainly to the grandchildren. But yeah, this idea of the head girl as well, that she took that role on, and that clearly she was destined for great things. You know, that leadership aspect, I guess, resonated with me as well. You know, I was only ever house captain. I never made it to head girl. So it's like, yeah, she sort of got the top job type thing. But as the legend has it, so she was trying to, I think, get her place at Pitman's typing school. But there's again, these legends that get told, right? That she was 5'2". Now I'm 6 foot. So already I'm kind of imagining myself dwarfing her, you know, and I think I do remember that we all sprouted quite quickly. We're all my 3 other siblings quite tall. So I kind of remember dwarfing her, and my dad's really tall as well. So there's that memory for me that evokes, but she didn't get into typing school because of her height. Now, listen, I'm not, you know, Pitmans, if they're out there, you know, I'm definitely not levying it that their way, but who knows, you know, what we tell ourselves about what coulda, shoulda, woulda. But the fact that she then went on and started to do some really interesting bits of work, and in fact took my mother on a kind of walking tour of London by her bits of work that she did in the jewelry company that she worked for. And there was I think a fashion company that she worked for, I guess, all in a supportive capacity. And I started out my life as a PA. So again, there's like this weird sort of You know, I got rejected from all of my grad training schemes, and so therefore I was, and I ended up, you know, going into the sort of right hand role capacity. So there we have it, right there and then. You know, the sort of hustle mentality, I guess, and getting rejection. You know, rejection is the fuel that then she kind of span out into London town. So again, I was desperate to get to London. Now through this research realized that maybe that was also something that really, you know, to this day I love this city. I love the richness of it, the fact that you can actually create opportunities for yourself, and that ultimately I guess she was somebody for whom her working life became something that she never lost. You know, she always worked, and she worked because she had to, but because she loved it, and because she was a former breadwinner, even before marriage, during marriage, and then during her divorce. So I just think that for me is something that, you know, I mean, be more Olive, right?
And really unusual for her era and her time that she was, as she was sort of put in those positions, you know, or, you know, made choices where she found herself in those positions. And what a thing. I mean, we sort of see sometimes in, you know, TV shows and things, these outstanding women who weren't sort of part of what we think of as the general look and behavior of women of a certain era. She was absolutely one of those vanguard women who was, you know, for better or worse, making it on her own many of the times.
Yeah, and I guess you lose your father overnight, heart attack, 16 years old, maybe from a sort of traumatic output. It's that idea, well, ain't no one else gonna, like, who I've got to, you know, put up or shut up type mentality. I guess that stoic word that keeps coming back to me as well, from that reality check of like, well, you know, of course, you know,
Well,
you put it in. And yeah, the reflection of all of the jobs that she did, and that also, I guess her mother, my great grandmother, would have had to have immediately understood how to, you know, run finances. And I think there was another sort of anecdote that she wasn't necessarily prepared for that. So in some of the conversations, fast forward now to women and wealth, I guess she was one of the first people to, I guess, experience this idea of that rug being pulled from you, and you have to understand where it all is and what the numbers of the bank accounts are and where it's all stored, and I guess the modern day passwords, right? And perhaps Olive was at the forefront of that. And I know that they rented out rooms, I guess a precursor of a sort of like an Airbnb slash lodging scenario, and that's ultimately how she met my granddad. Again, a whole weird sort of, whilst also having boyfriends and going out in London and having all these different jobs herself. And I guess that family unit all kind of living together under one roof. And I suppose her mother would have seen her meeting Brendan, my grandfather, and then them going from the family home into their married home. You know, it's I guess was probably needs must, but also perhaps, yeah, she maybe had some pushback from the people she met along the way, or maybe some of her female peers, sort of, perhaps she was different to them. And I think that difference in it needs based difference, or who else is going to pick up the tab type.
right. And I would say, and also just it seems from just knowing more about her life, also something in her, like some spark, some fire, some, I mean, the different people would have responded differently. Yeah.
100%. And so then finding out that, fast forward, when she had my mother, who was the eldest of the children, my mother again was birthed during an air raid. I mean, that for me,
During World War II in London.
during World War II, if that's not a story, I mean, that I never knew that. Did I subconsciously know it? No. To know my actual mother was of Olive, and in her kind of moment of giving birth, that she's dealing with the stuff, you know, the protecting your child as it comes into this world, whilst also that's going on around you. Possibly in terms of her childhood now, it was probably water off a duck's back, but I still think that for me is kind of, that's a sort of another level. And for my mother to have come into this world in that way as well, I guess that's another a part of the conversation my mother and I have been having, is this idea of, she jokes about keeping morsels of food in Tupperware in the fridge. But actually, my mum, yeah. You go back to my family home, and if you leave one mouthful, there is a piece of Tupperware that big that it gets put in. But, if you're born in an air raid, I guess you hold on to it all, right? You remember the bananas weren't even up for sale because of the rationing. Then you're going to keep the food from, you're going to put it in the Tupperware.
Indeed.
That's just a response.
No composting is allowed. All goes in the body, right? But I think you shared with me that your grandmother also would have to go down when the air raids were happening with your mother in the pram to, into bomb shelters while that was happening.
Yeah. I can't imagine, wartime, having babies where you would try and sort of stay in a family home, where you would then take my mother down into the underground at tube stations, then being used as air raid shelters, which has given me another sense when I use public transport all the time. I think it's a fantastic way to get around London sometimes on some formats. But certainly when I was passing through Archway Station recently, I was like, okay, this is literally where my granny raced down the road and, went underground with my mum in the pram as the sirens were going off. It's quite, it's not of our time, certainly. And I think with the context of the broader geopolitical landscape, I think we perhaps take a lot of the freedoms that we have for granted. And perhaps that's why my generation and perhaps my parents in their 80s, there is that slight disconnect that I certainly feel, where we assume safety and we assume peace of mind, and we don't assume to have to run and protect ourselves. So again, as lodged in my subconscious, that was like for my mother, and then her two sisters kind of from there, growing up in that backdrop. No doubt then coming into the swinging 60s thinking, well, we've survived that, so let's have some fun.
Finally.
Really.
So, which beautiful transition there, because you talked at the top about how she had this great style and that she was, interested in jewelry and dressing well and always sort of being on point, right? And that, I guess, that was probably also nurtured by the 60s, not that they didn't have great style in the 50s, but that she continued through her whole life to kind of push the envelope. I mean, she did some things that were very out of the box. Number one, getting divorced in was that in the 60s when she got divorced?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. My mother, all three were born, obviously, but yeah, it would have been just during that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what does your mom make of that?
I think because my mum's the eldest of the three, or now two, I think for my mother as a staunch Catholic as well, let's cut that in now.
Yeah.
I think you're not going to come out of that as a child anyway. A child, going through the split of two parents, during a time, albeit when things were starting to sort of be a little bit more sort of the sort of, I guess, the reactionary to some of the 40s, 50s, very kind of like stoic times. My mother's always sort of only ever pointed to it as being a time where she hates silence. And she's talked about silence as being something that she can't stand. We're a family that's loud and very kind of multi-layered, and we talk a lot and we share a lot. And I think that's in part that both my parents have worked really hard to make sure that we don't have these silences. And I think that's something that she's really pragmatic, my mother. And I think the preference of talking versus silence, divorce versus staying in silence, I think Olive would have not done it lightly, but certainly done it in a way that, knowing that there was a sort of lightness on the other side, I think that was definitely something, along with some of the decisions that Olive had made over the years. You don't wrap yourself in a Union Jack flag and get someone to take a photo. I mean, in those days, you had to like prep for photos, as I understand. Like photos were not just like a selfie here and there and everywhere. It was like big.
We're taking a photo.
Like, and even if she is in a bikini in that photo, which I'm assured she is, you know, things like that. Maybe she made controlled mistakes, or maybe she had this way about her where she knew instinctively that, you know, that was the way that she should immortalize or preserve that moment or protect her children. But I think, yeah, divorce in a sort of Catholic context, she wouldn't have done it in any way other than to know that she could provide for the children. So obviously she's got that mental memory of having done that as a child anyway. So perhaps would she have stayed had she not had that kind of safety net and not known that safety net to be there? And knowing that she was someone that was going to preserve her sense of, you know, outward facing kind of, you know, feminine strength. And one of the anecdotes of being able to draw on her stocking seams on the back of her legs, I think that for me says more about her ability to be very frugal, but also not miss a trick in terms of the perception externally. You know,
okay, then have to break this down for people. There will be people who do not understand.
For sure.
So back in the day, stockings, when they were made, they were not seamless. Like now, like when you wear stockings, maybe you can't even tell, right? Like if it's supposedly like skin colored. So in those days, there was a line that would run down the back, hopefully straight down the back of a woman's leg. And she had to get it just so. And then you would know she was wearing stockings, which was proper.
Yes. And I remember when I did one small memory when I was doing a school project to try and make paper look like it was from Roman times. People of a certain age might have done the tea bag thing, put paper in tea bag water. I remember my mother and Nana Olive saying that was also something that was used on legs to make sure that there was a sense. I guess the early fake tan, right? And then the line was drawn very carefully, and you'd get your sister to help you, you know, draw it so that there was no sense that could be a fake line. I mean, I don't even want to go there with aesthetics and how in 2025 one can make appearances seem different to what they are. I guess, you know, listen,
You're like, hey, Olive, we're doing this AI version now, okay?
Exactly. I mean, she would be here for it. I know.
She was there. She wanted I mean, because of rations and lack, she wouldn't always have had that, right? Being frugal. And she still showed up being her glamorous olive self, apparently.
Right to the end. And it's something I really remember about her, not wanting us to see her right at the end, or there was just this idea of, you know, even in this abject moment, even in these abject moments, that you would bring your best self. You would maximize your resources. You would not rest on your laurels. You would fight for that bit, that morsel, that scrap, that mentality of best foot forward. I guess that sort of British spirit, wartime thing that we see in posters. Like, it feels like she had that in space, and as I say, right to the end, despite all the things that she had experienced and yet to experience in her life. Yeah, I think it's something that I hope that I kind of take forward from not drawing on my legs, you know.
But if you were to pinpoint some of her qualities that you have wanted to, and you even think maybe you have successfully brought forward in your own personal life, in your professional life, what would you claim?
So I think I've worked very hard to define my values, certainly in the last 5 years, of community, connection, protection. Those 3 words always come up in my life. And I think she really, for me, shows that nothing is ever done in isolation. So, you know, using resources and people around her, fighting for what's right, protecting the interests of her family, but also with others. And a lot of that in having found out more about her protests, protesting whilst looking pristine. I mean, that's just, for me, kind of something that, you can push for change, and you can do it in a really collaborative, deeply positive, community-minded way. And I think that's definitely something that sitting on local community safety panels now, it's like, makes total sense to me that I would be doing that and advocating for change in community safety, where my grandmother did it in a way that was, still respectfully, she's not pictured burning things and fighting. She's there with her bag and her gloves with a sign saying, we will fight for what's right. And so I think for me, it's probably encapsulated in that idea of community and protection of my mother and my aunties, and also clearly she was someone who was community minded because she was around her fellow colleagues and worked and pushed for the right. Let's just be clear, what she was protesting for was to raise the retirement age because she was forced into stopping work. Mic drop, the end.
You cannot force you to retire and stop living and contributing.
Right. So for me, why is it that, as I've got an 87-year-old father, he's still, very, very, very active, both from a community perspective, but also he doesn't stop. He's also poking around, has been helping me immeasurably during the growth of my own business. So, kind of the apples don't fall far from the trees. Is work? Is it actually something bigger than that? Is it a way to build a community around you? Is it a way to protect others? Is it a way to provide for others? And certainly if that's taken away from you, how unjust that is. And that's definitely something I've inherited. And goodness me, if that's ends up being my mic drop of, just fighting for that one little thing, that one little bit of change, or that one little dot connection, then that's definitely come straight from her playbook.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if you just had one question that you could ask her. I mean, you were 14 when she died. And now you have so much time to reflect and talking to your mom. And if she just walked in the room right now, looking fabulous, what would you want to ask her?
I think it would be something about her nugget. She always had nuggets of where she sees me and in the world today. She would always kind of like give a clanger. So I'd probably want to kind of delve into how she feels about where we're at in life and society, and where I'm at in my life. I think she would respect the fact that I've got a business. I would ask her probably to give a little context about that. But I think for me, it would be definitely like I asked my father recently, is this the most chaotic time to be alive and run a business? He's like, no. I think a big check from her to say, I gave birth to your mother in a bomb shelter. Like, you're fine in your fancy, life now where no one wants for anything and all the rest of it. So I think other than asking her about fun girly things, I having seen one of the necklaces that a boyfriend gave her before she met my grandfather. It's like, oh, who gave you the necklace? Like a little stupid, from this like girly question. But then also I think that, the macro question, I think more to just ground me in the sense that, there have been chaotic times to be alive. Mm-hmm. There are always chaotic elements to living. But actually being able to tap into that sort of ancestral sort of strength can sometimes give you that little bit of a reality check.
The other thing, before we turn a little bit more to you and your work and your legacy, Kate, because we're envisioning making a film, right, where we would document Olive's life story. And I always encourage people to think outside of the interview scenario, right, of the questions and asking, and also scenes. And of course, we get to use our full imagination now. But what scene, like if you had a 30-second clip of her in a moment, in a place, doing something, not necessarily talking, what would that scene be that you just wished you could play over and over again of Olive?
so easy. It's flag, that visual arresting imagery of, for me, running a British business, her as a woman, the build up to that moment, the fact that photos and memory capture were just not, how did she prepare for it? What was she thinking? That was going to be, was it a private memory that she never thought was going to be seeing the light of day? Who took it? Why was it celebrating? We think one of the Jubilees, possibly, the Jubilees of the coronations and things like that. For me, I mean, that's just a whole, it's literally a scene that plays out in my head. Because I have that picture in my home here in London, and it's a picture that is for me one of those sort of, in your wallet pictures.
And I'll just add for the listeners that this image is the header in Kate's episode page, and it's also the full image is on the page if you keep scrolling, so you can go there. So this is the scene is the lead up to the taking of this photo and the taking of the photo.
Correct.
Beautiful.
Correct. Because it pulls all those strands together.
So Kate, you worked in a family office and then you moved on to security and have your own company. And I am wondering what you find really most meaningful, maybe in the context of this whole conversation about Olive, about the work that you're doing today.
I think working with generational, hard-fought, hard-preserved wealth and custodianship of that, handing things down through the generations. Certainly when I started out in my career, I didn't think I would get the opportunity to work in an environment where, as I say, this idea of great wealth done well would be something that I would have the honor and privilege to be even at the sort of the sidelines of. And I think when I reflect on Olive's life experience, this idea of service to and protection of the interests of family and also community, I think what's great is in my daily work life, I can do that with my team. I can try and build ways that we can do that from private sector to public sector. I can easily have a framework now for the sorts of types of hats that I wear around the business. So the non-exec and the kind of trusteeships where I'm trying to help to get the right funds into the right places to solve some of the sort of more societal problems around protection. The gender advisory committee role that I had the honor to be asked to, that council that I was asked to sit on 5 years ago, from a national defense and a national security point of view, all the way into the individual. I think she certainly is enabling me to live out my values, but also to perhaps push some boundaries and also say, well, we've always done what we've always done. We always get what we've always got. What is the world of tomorrow going to need? And hopefully through the business, being able to unpick some of that and sit at the bridges of knowing that I come from a very, 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 boots on the ground family. And also having had these incredible experiences that I've had working for some of the most incredible clients and families that I could have imagined working with. And somehow bringing those two together, the two can coexist very well together. That for me has and is the sort of driving force of the business. And some of this research has really helped me to understand that kind of activist's streak that can sometimes come to the fore and, channel it in hopefully the right way and see my life as 46 as I am now as a kind of halfway staging point to thinking, well, okay, how can I honor that legacy and how can I build with what we're doing as a business to protect how we can actually really move the needle? Because I clearly come from a sort of very, very straightforward, no frills background where if I can be the daughter of a woman who was born in an air raid bomb shelter, then, I think that's a pretty good basis point to connect with some of the people that I work with on a daily basis. And I think that's something I'm going to be increasingly proud of and that I point to.
the final thing I want to ask you about, which we haven't even mentioned this yet, but that you're an auntie. Well, you drove by it, but you're a proud auntie. Don't have children of your own, and of course are running this major business. And I'm wondering, like, if your nieces and nephews had the chance in 50 years from now to be talking about you, like you're talking about Olive, what would you hope that they said, this is Kate's legacy? This is what I remember her for. This is who she was.
I think I would hope that a bit like a bit like Olive's sort of blending of the gender roles, my mother and my father's example of teamwork and 60 years of marriage this year, that they would say that despite I don't have my own children, but that I was there for them to help them to connect with this family story and create their own platform to do great stuff with. That we kind of remember and we sort of honor our ancestors, these amazing men and women, because I often talk about my grandmothers but don't honor my grandfathers. My grandfather, my father didn't even know my grandfather, so I'm in the process now of getting a picture of my grandfather so that my father can see a picture of him. So I'm on the researchable path for that. I think including them on this journey as well, it's like a baton then. And I think for me to know that in 50 years time, I'm just a part of that baton, and that there's some funny stories that hopefully I've been able to take them to some, Justin Bieber's and all this kind of crazy stuff that I've done with them over the years. Because I've always said to them, I'm not the arts and crafts auntie, I'm the experiential auntie. So maybe that'll have lodged in their consciousness that I, even taking my nieces to see films recently. I think I'm investing hard in the Disney franchise, is what I would say, in the last decades of my auntyhood. But they would have seen that was, that like Olive, fun. Fact that I'm a woman is kind of, neither here nor there. Built this thing with my bare hands, respect, and for that, maybe even as I joke to my two young nieces, who's going to start working with me first? Which one of you? And they're like, me. Who knows? Maybe they're part of building, the business as a centennial brand and that outlasts me. Maybe they're not, but I just hope for them that they have this connection with who they are, because I think when you know who you are, you know a little bit clearer where you're going. I think I'm ever grateful to both my parents for coming together and providing that teamwork base point for me to be able to even have this conversation, let alone the fact that I know my 3 nieces, 1 nephew, 5 godchildren, and so it continues, can know that I was some small part of enabling that, whether it was for one of my godchildren, the driving lessons, or for another, the Excel spreadsheet of how you can't afford a horse, that sort of thing, which, I'm very, very useful for certain parts of auntyhood and godmotherhood. And then I'm probably not your best friend in showing you that owning a horse is a net drain, and therefore the income column, when it's less than the outgoing column, we don't have a horse. So maybe some of the bearer of bad news, but some of the kind of, the reality check, but also hopefully an activist with a smile, and something that, Olive would have looked on and does look on. And because I do feel she is, as I do feel with all my grandparents, that there's a driving force bigger than me that propels me. So I guess that you can take out the word legacy and just put in that the fact that this is going to outlive me.
It's going to outlive me. Kate, I have so delighted in getting to know Olive and also other characters from your family tree and you. It's been really a joy and just so fun. And thank you for sharing Olive with all of us.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And yeah, Olive Francis Duncan, what a hero.